The wind howled outside the observatory as Eli adjusted the lens of his telescope, aligning it with the coordinates where the unidentified object was last spotted. The isolation of the mountaintop observatory was usually comforting, a sanctuary away from the bustling city life, but tonight it felt unsettlingly eerie. As he peered through the eyepiece, a faint glow caught his attention, moving erratically against the backdrop of constellations. Heart pounding with both excitement and a touch of fear, Eli took a step back from the telescope and rubbed his eyes, wondering if fatigue was playing tricks on him. Deciding to investigate, Eli grabbed his flashlight and heavy jacket, stepping out into the cold night. The path down the ridge was slippery, and the beam of his flashlight bobbed with every step, casting eerie shadows among the twisted forms of the ancient pines. When he reached the clearing, he stopped dead. There, partly obscured by shadows, was a craft unlike any he had ever seen. It was sleek, metallic, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His breath visible in the cold air, Eli approached slowly, his every instinct screaming to run, yet curiosity glued him to the spot. Suddenly, a panel on the side of the craft hissed open, and a figure stepped out. It was clearly not human, taller than him, with luminescent skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Eli froze, flashlight in hand, as the figure stared at him with eyes that reflected the starlight. "Hello," Eli called out tentatively, his voice cracking slightly in the night air. The figure tilted its head, observing him with an intense gaze, then responded in a surprisingly melodic voice, albeit with an unfamiliar accent. "Do you understand me?" it asked, its voice carrying an undertone of hope. "Yes, I understand you," Eli replied, his initial fear giving way to fascination. "My name is Eli. Are you from another world?" The alien nodded, stepping closer. "I am Mira," she said, pointing to herself. "My vessel is damaged. I am stranded." Eli looked back at the craft, then at Mira. "I'm not sure how much help I can be with your vessel, but you're welcome to come to the observatory. It's just up the hill. I have tools. Maybe some of them might be useful." Mira seemed to consider this, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, Eli. I accept your offer." As they walked back up the hill together, Eli tried to keep the conversation going to ease the palpable tension. "What's it like traveling through space?" he asked, genuinely curious. "It is lonely sometimes," Mira answered, looking up at the sky dotted with stars. "But seeing worlds like yours makes the solitude worthwhile." Reaching the observatory, Eli ushered Mira inside where it was warm. He showed her around a modest interior, pointing out his array of scattered tools and the central computer system that monitored the skies. "This is where I work," Eli said with a hint of pride. "I watch the stars, track asteroids. I never thought I'd be hosting an interstellar visitor." Mira walked over to the telescope, examining it with an expert eye. "This is similar to our observation tools," she noted. "May I?" Of course, Eli stepped aside, watching as Mira adjusted the telescope with surprising familiarity. As she peered through it, Eli watched her, his mind teeming with questions about her world, her journey, and what unexpected turn his night had taken. Together in the silence, surrounded by the cosmos, a bridge began to form, one not just of stars and space, but of shared curiosity and a budding friendship that promised to defy the vast distances of the universe. Chapter 2: Learning to Communicate. Morning light filtered through the windows of the observatory, casting long shadows across the floor where Eli and Mira sat surrounded by open books and several electronic devices. The previous night's tension had given way to a buzz of excitement as they embarked on the complex task of bridging their communication gap. Eli flipped through a notebook filled with hastily scribbled notes and sketches, trying to make sense of the phonetic symbols Mira had described from her language. "So this symbol," he pointed at a curved line with several dots above it, "represents the sound thra?" he asked, attempting to pronounce it. Mira nodded, her voice melodic as she corrected his intonation. "Close, but it vibrates more at the back of your throat. Thra." Eli tried again, his face scrunching in concentration. "Thra," he echoed, earning a satisfied nod from Mira. "Excellent. Now try this one," Mira said, sketching another symbol. "It's used in expressing gratitude." Watching them intently, Eli's old friend and fellow researcher, Tom, chimed in. "This is fascinating. It's like we're deciphering an ancient code." Tom had arrived early in the morning after a frenzied phone call from Eli about their extraordinary visitor. Mira smiled at Tom, appreciating his enthusiasm. "Your languages have so many nuances, too. It's challenging, but intriguing." The trio spent the morning trading words and phrases. Eli and Tom learned how to say basic greetings and expressions of thanks in Myra's language, while she picked up English words with surprising speed. So, how do you say friend in your language? Tom asked, eager to add another word to his growing vocabulary. In my tongue, a friend is Seli, Mira replied. She then hesitated, a thoughtful look crossing her face. But it means more than just friend. It's someone who is trusted deeply, who has shared significant experiences with you. That's a beautiful way to put it, Eli remarked, making a note of it. And you, Mira, are becoming a Seli to us. Myra's eyes brightened at the comment, and she responded in kind, and you to me. As the morning progressed, Eli introduced Mira to the computer system that automated much of the observatory's functions. We can track almost anything in the sky with this. Planets, stars, even satellites. Mira was quick to grasp the technology, her fingers gliding over the touch screen with a practiced ease. We have similar technology, she explained. It's necessary for navigation and communication across the stars. Tom, who had been fiddling with a recording device, suggested, why don't we record some of these lessons? It could be invaluable for future reference and for others who might want to learn. That's a great idea, Eli agreed. He set up the device to record their next session, where they planned to dive deeper into each other's grammar and syntax. By lunchtime, the observatory was filled with laughter and the sounds of a budding friendship. Tom had brought sandwiches, and they all sat eating, enjoying the simple pleasure of sharing a meal. Mira, what's your favorite food on your planet? Tom asked, curious about more than just her language. Mira thought for a moment. We have a dish called garland. It's made from the roots of a yellum tree, mixed with spices. It's very nutritious and has a complex flavor. Sounds exotic, Eli mused. Wish we could try it. Maybe one day. I can show you, Mira said, a wistful tone in her voice. As the afternoon waned, they returned to their lessons, each exchange drawing them closer, not just bridging worlds but hearts and minds. Their dialogue wasn't just about words. It was building bridges, understanding, and an unexpected but profound connection. Chapter 3, Echoes of Home. The air was crisp as Eli led Mira and Tom down a narrow path away from the observatory. Dappled sunlight filtered through the trees, painting patterns on the ground as they walked. It had been a few days since Myra's arrival, and their progress with language and culture exchange had been astounding. But today, Mira seemed distracted, her usual attentiveness replaced by a quiet, faraway look. Where are we going, Eli? Mira finally asked, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a soft note of curiosity mixed with melancholy. Eli glanced over his shoulder, offering a reassuring smile. You will see. I thought you might enjoy a change of scenery. Tom chimed in with a playful grin, and besides, Eli's idea of a good time usually involves dragging people through the wilderness. Eli rolled his eyes. It's not wilderness, it's a nature reserve. And trust me, Mira, you'll like it. They continued in comfortable silence until they reached a clearing that overlooked a sprawling valley. The view was breathtaking, rolling hills, dense forests, and a meandering river reflecting the sunlight like liquid silver. Myra's eyes widened, and she stepped forward, her luminous skin catching the light. It's magnificent, she whispered, her gaze sweeping over the landscape. She stood still for a moment, then closed her eyes, breathing deeply. It reminds me of home. Eli and Tom exchanged a glance, sensing this was an important moment. Tell us about it, Eli said gently. Mira opened her eyes, a wistful smile playing on her lips. My world has valleys like this, though the colors are different. Our sky is tinged with green during the day, and at night it sparkles with clusters of bright orbs. We call them Yillinlon, which means dancing lights. That sounds beautiful, Tom said, genuinely intrigued. I'd love to see that someday. Mira nodded slowly, a hint of sadness creeping into her expression. I wish I could show you. Eli noticed the shift in her mood and changed the subject slightly. Do you have places like this on your world? Places where you come to think, or just... Yes, Mira replied, her voice softening. There was a cliff near my dwelling. I would sit there for hours, watching the stars and feeling the wind. It was peaceful. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the rustling leaves and smell the flowers that grew nearby. Tom, sensing the heaviness in the air, spoke up. Maybe we can find something similar here. A place you can come to when you need a moment of quiet. Mira looked at him, gratitude evident in her gaze. Thank you, Tom. They stood in silence for a while, letting the wind speak for them. Finally, Eli reached into his backpack and pulled out a small tablet. Mira, I thought you might want to show us more of your home. You mentioned having some images. Myra's face lit up, and she quickly retrieved a small disc-like device from her satchel. Placing it on the ground, she activated it with a touch. Holographic projections flickered to life, displaying vivid scenes from her world, a city with towering spires that seemed to glow from within, fields of bioluminescent flowers, and finally, a group of beings similar to her, laughing and conversing around a fire. Eli and Tom watched in awe. Your world is incredible, Eli said softly. It's so alive. It is, Mira agreed, but her eyes were distant. Or it was. Tom's brow furrowed. What happened? Mira hesitated, then lowered her gaze. Our world is not safe anymore. Conflict drove many of us away. I was tasked with finding a new place, one where we could start again. But my journey ended here, stranded. Eli stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. We'll do what we can to help you. You're not alone anymore. Myra's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of hope. Thank you, Eli. Tom cleared his throat, trying to lighten the mood. So, Mira, if you were showing us around your homeworld, what would you recommend we try first? Myra's lips curved into a small smile. I would take you to the Yellum Forest during the night. The trees glow with light, and the air is filled with music from small creatures called lyris. It is magical. Eli grinned. We'll have to settle for fireflies here, but it sounds enchanting. The three of them sat together, talking about their worlds, their memories, and their dreams. Time slipped by unnoticed until the sun dipped low on the horizon. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Mira looked out over the valley once more. In the silence between species, there is understanding, she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. Eli reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. You're right, Mira, and that's something we'll build on together. The warmth of his touch and the sincerity in his words filled the quiet space with something Mira hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. The three of them sat there, watching the sun set, united by the unspoken promise of friendship, understanding, and hope for a better tomorrow. Chapter 4. In the silence between species. Eli adjusted the focus of the telescope while Mira observed the stars above, her luminous skin reflecting the faint light from the observatory's instruments. It was a quiet night, the kind where even the air seemed to hold its breath. Tom, seated nearby with a notepad in hand, was sketching designs for a project they hoped might help repair Myra's vessel. What do you think, Mira? Eli asked, turning the telescope toward a cluster of stars she had pointed out earlier. Does this remind you of anything from your travels? She leaned closer, her gaze distant yet intent. Yes, this cluster resembles the Nara constellation from my home, she said softly, her voice tinged with nostalgia. We used it to navigate the vast expanses. It was our guide through the unknown. Tom looked up from his sketches. Nara constellation? Sounds like it has some deep significance. It does, Mira replied, her eyes never leaving the stars. Each family on my world has a star they claim as their own, a symbol of our bond and connection. The Nara constellation is special to us all. Eli stepped away from the telescope and moved closer to Mira. Do you have a star in it? He asked quietly. Yes, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. It's faint, near the edge, but it's mine. Tom's pen paused mid-stroke. That's beautiful, he murmured. We humans have traditions with stars, too. You know. Like what? Mira asked, genuinely curious. Eli exchanged a glance with Tom, then said, some cultures believe that when a loved one passes away, they become a star, watching over those they leave behind. It's a way of keeping them close, even when they're gone. Myra's eyes softened. Perhaps, then, your beliefs are not so different from ours after all. Silence settled over the room, comfortable and profound. The faint hum of the observatory's instruments filled the background as the three of them continued their work. Mira was the first to break the quiet. May I show you something? She asked, retrieving a small metallic cube from her satchel. This device stores images and sounds from my world. Eli and Tom nodded eagerly. Mira pressed a sequence of buttons, and the air above the cube shimmered before displaying a holographic image. A vast landscape appeared, filled with towering crystalline structures that sparkled under a green-tinted sky. There were beings like Mira, moving about with purpose, their glowing forms casting ethereal light. This was my city, Mira explained, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. It was once a place of great learning and discovery. Tom leaned closer. Stunning. What are those structures made of? Crystals formed from the ground beneath us, Mira said, pride evident in her tone. They channel energy, enabling us to power our technology and preserve our history. Eli was mesmerized. You've built so much. I can't even imagine what it must have been like. Myra's expression darkened. It was magnificent, but also fragile. Conflict tore it apart. The weight of her words hung in the air. Tom shifted uncomfortably, trying to steer the conversation back to lighter ground. Well, you're here now, and maybe we can help you build something again. Mira nodded slowly, the glimmer of hope returning to her eyes. Thank you, Tom. I would like that. They spent the next hour exchanging stories about their respective worlds. Eli spoke of Earth's diverse landscapes, while Mira recounted tales of exploration and unity from her own history. The bond between them grew stronger with every word, every story shared. Eventually, Eli stood and stretched. I have an idea, he announced. Why don't we step outside? There's something I want to show you. Intrigued, Mira and Tom followed him out into the cool night. The stars above were brilliant, a sea of light stretching endlessly. Eli pointed to a patch of sky. Do you see that bright star? We call it Vega. Mira nodded. Yes, it is visible from many worlds. Eli smiled. When I was a kid, I used to come out here and make up stories about the stars. That 1 inch, he pointed again, was always my hero, lighting the way through the darkness. Tom chuckled. I didn't know you were a storyteller, Eli. Everyone has stories, Eli said, his eyes on Mira. It's how we make sense of things, especially the things we don't understand. Mira stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the starry expanse. In the silence between species, there is room for understanding, she said quietly, echoing a sentiment she'd shared before. Here, under the stars, we are not so different. The three stood together, their breaths misting in the cool air. For a long moment, words seemed unnecessary. The universe above spoke for them, reminding them of the vastness of space and the smallness of individual struggles. Finally, Eli broke the silence. We'll help you, Mira. Whatever it takes to get you back home, or to build a new one here. Together, Tom added, his voice firm. Myra's eyes glowed brighter for a moment. Together, she agreed. As they walked back to the observatory, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. In that moment, it was clear that the distance between worlds was not insurmountable, not with friendship, understanding, and a shared determination to bridge the divide. Chapter 5, Cultural Revelations. The observatory's main room buzzed with activity as Eli, Tom, and Mira gathered around a makeshift display table, covered with artifacts and objects from both worlds. The air was thick with curiosity and the electric energy of discovery. Today, they had decided to deepen their understanding of each other's cultures through a shared exploration of art, music, and cuisine. All right, Eli said, clapping his hands together. Let's start with music. Mira, you mentioned something about harmonic resonance in your art? Yes, Mira replied, a flicker of excitement in her eyes. On my world, music is created by the vibrations of energy crystals. Each note corresponds to a different frequency, and together, they create harmonies that are not just heard, but felt. Tom, who had been fiddling with a small speaker connected to his laptop, looked up. That sounds incredible. I wonder if we can recreate something similar here. Mira nodded and stepped forward, placing a small, glowing crystal onto the table. This crystal is attuned to the lowest frequency in our harmonic range. If you have a device that can emit vibrations, it may resonate. Eli raised an eyebrow. Tom, can we make it work? Worth a shot. Tom leaned in, adjusting the output of the speaker. He selected a low-frequency tone and slowly increased the volume. The air vibrated, and moments later, the crystal emitted a soft, pulsing hum that filled the room. Myra's eyes lit up. You did it. The three of them listened in awe as the crystal's hum grew richer, weaving harmonies that seemed to seep into their very bones. Eli felt a chill run down his spine. It's alive. It is, Mira confirmed, a hint of pride in her voice. On my world, we use this music for celebrations, for healing, and even for meditation. Tom's eyes gleamed with fascination. Can you teach us one of your songs? Mira hesitated, then nodded. She began to hum softly, the sound blending seamlessly with the crystal's resonance. Her melody was haunting, filled with notes that seemed to speak of ancient memories and distant stars. Eli and Tom listened, captivated, their own world momentarily forgotten. When the song ended, a heavy silence settled over them. Eli broke it with a whisper. "That was a beautiful." "Thank you," Mira said, her voice soft. "Now, show me one of your songs." Tom grinned, grabbing his guitar from a corner of the room. "This is a bit different, but here goes." He strummed a few chords, launching into a lively folk tune. The contrast to Myra's ethereal music was striking, but she clapped along, clearly enjoying it. When the song ended, Mira tilted her head. "Your music carries joy and energy. It's refreshing." Eli chuckled. "Human music can be a lot of things. Joyful, sad, chaotic. It depends on the mood. Can we try something together?" Mira asked, a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "Absolutely," Tom replied. The next hour was a blur of experimentation, mixing human and alien melodies, blending frequencies, and laughing at their failed attempts. The room became a tapestry of sound, woven with notes from two different worlds. As the musical exploration wound down, Eli moved to the next part of their cultural exchange. He pulled out a canvas and paints. "Mira, you mentioned that visual art is important on your world. Care to show us?" Mira picked up a brush, examining it curiously. "Our art is often three-dimensional and interactive, but I'll try." She dipped the brush in paint and began to create swirling patterns, reminiscent of galaxies and nebulae. Her strokes were precise yet fluid, and within minutes a mesmerizing scene unfolded on the canvas. "On my world, we use colors to represent emotions. This blue signifies calmness, while this green signifies growth." Eli, inspired, picked up a brush and began to paint alongside her. He chose earth tones, browns and greens, blending them to depict a forest. "These colors represent life and connection on Earth." Tom, never want to be left out, added splashes of vibrant red and yellow. "And these are for passion and energy." What can I say? I like to stand out. The three of them laughed, their hands covered in paint. By the time they finished, the canvas was a chaotic yet beautiful blend of their combined visions, a testament to both their differences and the harmony they were beginning to find. With their artistic collaboration complete, Eli turned to the final part of their cultural exchange: food. "I hope you're ready to try something new, Mira." She watched with interest as Eli and Tom prepared a simple meal: bread, cheese, fruits, and vegetables. On Earth, food isn't just about sustenance. It's a way to bring people together. Mira nodded thoughtfully. "On my world, we also share meals as a symbol of trust and unity." They ate together, savoring each bite. Myra's reactions were a mix of surprise and delight. "This bread," she said, holding a piece, "is unlike anything I've tasted." "It's a staple here," Eli explained. "Simple but satisfying." After the meal, they sat together, basking in the warmth of their shared experience. Mira looked at Eli and Tom, a sense of peace washing over her. "I never expected to find such connection here." Eli reached out, placing his hand over hers. "It's because, deep down, we're not so different. In the silence between species, we have found understanding," Mira said, repeating words that had become a quiet mantra among them. Tom raised his glass. "To understanding, and whatever crazy adventure comes next." They clinked their glasses together, laughter and friendship weaving tighter bonds. The night stretched on, and in that room, with music, art, and shared stories, they discovered that even across vast distances and different cultures, there was a place for connection, a place where the silence between species spoke volumes. Chapter 6: The Touch of Understanding. The observatory was unusually quiet that evening. The hum of equipment and the soft rustling of papers were the only sounds as Eli and Mira worked side by side, piecing together data they hoped would aid in repairing her damaged vessel. Tom had stepped out, leaving the two of them in a comfortable silence. It had become second nature to work together, their movements in sync, as if they had been partners for years. Mira paused, her fingers hovering over a small metallic component she had been examining. "Eli," she began softly, "I have a question." He looked up from his tools, sensing a shift in her tone. "What is it? Why do you help me so willingly?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "You had no obligation to aid a stranger from another world." Eli set down his wrench and leaned back in his chair, contemplating her words. "I guess I've always been drawn to the stars, to what's out there. Meeting you made that dream real. But beyond that, he hesitated, then continued. I've come to care about you, Mira. It's that simple. Myra's gaze softened, and she placed the component down. On my world, trust is not given freely. It is earned through acts and time. You and Tom, you have earned it. I'm glad to hear that, Eli replied with a small smile. And we'll keep earning it. A comfortable silence settled over them again as they returned to their work. Hours passed as they examined blueprints and tested theories. Occasionally, they would pause to share an observation or joke, the air growing warmer with each exchange. Finally, exhausted but pleased with their progress, Eli stretched and yawned. I think that's enough for tonight. Mira nodded, rubbing her eyes. Agreed. Rest is essential. As they stood, Eli caught sight of Myra's hand, marked with faint glowing lines that pulsed when she was deeply focused. He reached out, stopping himself just before touching her. May I? He asked, his voice low. She nodded, her gaze never leaving his. Eli gently took her hand, marveling at the light that traced delicate patterns across her skin. What does this mean? He asked, his thumb brushing lightly over one of the lines. It reflects my energy, my emotions, Mira explained. It's a part of who I am. When I am calm, it is faint. When I am moved, it shines brighter. Eli looked up at her, their faces inches apart. Right now, it's glowing. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was a charged moment of stillness. Then, slowly, they leaned in, their breaths mingling. The first touch of their lips was tentative, a question asked and answered in the same heartbeat. As they kissed, the glowing lines on Myra's skin brightened, casting a soft light that filled the room. Eli pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation. Is this okay? Mira cupped his face, her touch warm. More than okay, she said, her voice steady. It feels right. They kissed again, deeper this time, exploring each other's touch with a gentleness born of genuine connection. Eli's hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer. Myra's fingers traced the line of his jaw, then moved down to rest on his shoulders. Each movement spoke of trust, of the bond they had built over days of shared experiences. When they finally broke apart, they stood in silence, letting the moment settle around them. The air was charged, but there was no need for words. Eventually, Eli spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. Mira nodded, her eyes bright with determination. Together. The door creaked, and Tom's voice interrupted their moment. Hey, did I miss anything interesting? Eli and Mira exchanged a glance, their connection unspoken but understood. Nothing you can't catch up on, Eli said, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Tom raised an eyebrow, but chose not to press further. All right, then. Back to work tomorrow. Back to work, Eli agreed, his eyes meeting Myra's once more. As Tom rambled about a new idea for their repairs, Mira and Eli shared a look, a silent promise that, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, they would walk it together. The touch of understanding they had shared was more than just a spark. It was the beginning of something neither of them had dared to hope for. Chapter 7, A Night of Discovery. The sun had long since set, leaving the observatory bathed in the soft glow of its instruments. Outside, stars blanketed the sky in breathtaking numbers, reminding Eli and Mira of the infinite vastness that had brought them together. Tonight was different. There was an electric charge in the air, a sense that something was about to shift between them. Eli leaned against the railing on the balcony, eyes fixed on the horizon. Mira stood beside him, her glowing lines shimmering softly, mirroring the stars. They had spent the day testing new configurations for her damage vessel, each step forward a small victory. But now with the work done, they were left with the quiet in each other. Do you ever just stare at the stars and wonder what's out there? Eli asked, breaking the silence. His voice was low, thoughtful. All the time, Mira replied. But for me, it is more than wonder. It is a longing. Longing. Eli turned to look at her. She nodded, her gaze distant. There are so many worlds, so many possibilities. Yet, for all our travels, there is always a place we yearn to return to. My world is gone. I have no place to return to. Eli's heart ached at her words. You have a place here, Mira. With us. With me. The air between them grew heavy with emotion. Mira met his eyes, searching for any sign of uncertainty. She found none. You have given me more than I could have hoped for, Eli. A connection. a sense of belonging. Slowly, she reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. Her touch was warm, the glow of her skin intensifying. They stood there, hand in hand, as if the universe had narrowed to just the two of them. Would you like to go for a walk? Eli asked suddenly, needing to move to give this moment the space it deserved. Yes, Mira replied softly. I would like that. They left the observatory behind, wandering through the surrounding woods. The trees cast long shadows, but the moonlight illuminated their path. They walked in silence, the only sounds their footsteps and the distant calls of night creatures. Eventually, they reached a clearing where the moon hung low and bright, casting a silver sheen over everything. Eli stopped and turned to Mira. This place is special to me. I come here to think, to clear my head. It's beautiful, Mira said, stepping closer. Thank you for sharing it with me. They stood facing each other, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on them. Finally, Eli spoke. I'm not sure what this is between us, Mira, but I know it's real. I feel it every time I look at you. I feel it too, Mira said, her voice trembling slightly. I've never allowed myself to feel this way. It's frightening. It doesn't have to be, Eli whispered. He reached out, brushing a strand of her hair back. We can figure it out together. Their faces were inches apart, their breaths mingling. Mira closed the distance, their lips meeting in a slow, tender kiss. It was different from before, deeper, more certain. This was not just an exploration. It was an affirmation of everything they had become to each other. As they kissed, Myra's hands moved to Eli's shoulders, and he wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer. The warmth of their connection spread, igniting something within them both. Their movements were gentle but urgent, each touch a promise, each caress a declaration. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads pressed together, Eli whispered, Are you sure? Yes, Mira said, her voice steady. I want this. I want you. They lay down together on the soft grass, the night sky their only witness. Their kisses grew more passionate, exploring each other's bodies with a mix of reverence and desire. Eli's hands traced the glowing lines on Myra's skin, marveling at their warmth and the way they pulsed with her heartbeat. Mira responded by running her fingers through his hair, her touch sending shivers down his spine. Time lost meaning as they gave themselves to the moment. They moved slowly, savoring every touch, every whispered word. It was a union not just of bodies, but of souls, a merging of two beings who had found each other against impossible odds. Afterward, they lay side by side, their hands entwined. The stars above seemed closer, brighter, as if sharing in their joy. Eli turned to Mira, a contented smile on his lips. In all my dreams of what could be out there, I never imagined this. Neither did I, Mira said, her voice soft but strong. Yet, here we are. In the silence between species, Eli murmured, echoing her earlier words, there is understanding. And love. Yes, Mira agreed, tightening her hold on his hand. Love that transcends boundaries. They lay together in the clearing, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. In that moment, all the challenges they faced seemed distant, overshadowed by the connection they had forged. Whatever the future held, they knew they would face it together, bound by a love that defied the stars themselves. Chapter 8, A Farewell and a Promise. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Eli stood atop the observatory's main platform, his eyes fixed on the shimmering outline of Myra's vessel. Over the past few weeks, they had worked tirelessly, repairing, recalibrating, and reshaping their plans. Now it was almost ready for departure. Mira approached quietly, her presence immediately felt. She stopped a few steps away, her expression a mixture of resolve and sadness. It's nearly complete, she said, her voice carrying on the wind. Soon it will be time. Eli swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze for a moment. I know. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, a reminder of all they had shared and all that lay ahead. Tom's voice cut through the tension, calling out from below. Hey, everything's stable for now. But if you ask me, a few more days of testing wouldn't hurt. Mira managed a small smile. Always the perfectionist, Tom. He walked up to join them, wiping grease from his hands. Someone has to be. He looked at Eli, then at Mira, and the smile faded. It's really happening, isn't it? Mira nodded. Yes. My people need to know I am safe. And there are others, like me, still out there searching. Tom exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, I wish you didn't have to go. But I get it. Eli finally turned to face Mira, his eyes meeting hers. So, what happens next? Mira stepped closer, her gaze steady. I will find a way to communicate, to let you know where I am. And I will come back. I promise. You better, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. You got a place here now. Don't forget that. Mira nodded, reaching out to clasp his hand. I won't. They stood in silence for a moment, each of them grappling with the impending farewell. Finally, Mira turned to Eli. Will you walk with me? She asked softly. Of course, he said. They moved away from the platform, descending into the quiet woods. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth. They walked slowly, savoring each step. Neither of them spoke until they reached the clearing where they had shared so much. I don't want this to be goodbye, Eli admitted, his voice breaking slightly. It isn't, Mira replied, her own voice trembling. This is a beginning. For you, for me, for both of our worlds. What we've built here, it matters. Eli reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. I'm going to miss you. Every day. And I you, Mira said. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. But we will see each other again. I believe that. He pulled her close, their embrace tight and desperate, as if holding on could somehow stop time. When they parted, Myra's glowing lines were bright, reflecting the depth of her emotions. Take this, she said, pressing a small, crystalline pendant into his palm. It's a communication device attuned to me. If you ever need me, if you ever want to reach out, use it. Eli held the pendant tightly, feeling its warmth. I will. They returned to the observatory, where Tom was making final adjustments. The vessel's lights flickered to life, and the hum of its engines filled the air. Mira stepped back, taking one last look at her friends. Thank you. For everything. No, thank you, Tom said, his voice rough. For showing us what's possible. Eli walked with Mira to the vessel's entrance. Be safe, he whispered. I will be, she promised, touching his cheek one last time. I will come back. With a final glance, she stepped inside. The vessel's door closed with a soft hiss, and the engines roared to life. Eli and Tom stepped back, shielding their eyes as the ship lifted off. It hovered for a moment, then shot into the sky, leaving a trail of light that slowly faded into the night. The two men stood in silence, staring at the empty sky. Finally, Tom spoke. Think she'll keep her promise? Eli looked down at the crystalline pendant in his hand, feeling its warmth. I know she will. They walked back to the observatory, the silence between them filled with memories and hope. Life would go on, and challenges would come. But they would face it all, strengthened by what they had built together, with Mira and with each other. As they reached the door, Eli paused, looking up at the stars. In the silence between species, he whispered, there is understanding, and love that transcends boundaries. Tom clapped him on the back. Come on, we've got work to do. She'll be back. Eli nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Yes, she will. Together, they walked inside, ready to continue their journey, knowing that the bonds they had forged would endure, no matter how far apart the stars carried them.